Welcome to Life Stories, where the people you love most can sometimes be the ones who make you feel the most invisible. What if the person who raised you, gave up everything for you, quietly carried your world, was suddenly treated like a burden the moment they needed help? This isn't fiction. It's a story about sacrifice without recognition, love without return, and the quiet strength it takes to finally say, enough. Stay with us, because what starts as a story about illness becomes something far more powerful, about legacy, chosen family, and the kind of courage that speaks louder than blood. Let's begin. The first time Helen Grant realized her daughter no longer saw her as a person was on a Tuesday. She had just finished folding a basket of laundry, Rachel's laundry, the grandkids' clothes, socks with cartoon dinosaurs, a silk blouse Helen had hand-washed out of habit. Rachel had come home late from work, dropped her purse on the kitchen island, and barely nodded in her direction. "Dinner's in the oven," Helen had said gently. "I made the chicken you like." Rachel didn't look up from her phone. "Cool. Can you grab Noah's soccer jersey from the dryer? It's picture day tomorrow." No thank you. No smile. No acknowledgement of the hours Helen spent ferrying two kids to school, wiping noses, making lunches, scrubbing the bathtub. Just an endless stream of requests. It had been like that for years. And Helen, who once ran a nonprofit in Portland, who had walked away from a loveless marriage with nothing but her car and a single suitcase, had accepted it. Until that night. That night, when she stood in the laundry room and realized she couldn't feel her legs. It was a strange sensation, like the ground had quietly disappeared. She reached for the counter to steady herself and felt her knees buckle. A moment later, she was on the floor. Cold tile, spinning ceiling. When Rachel finally found her, she was still conscious, barely. "Mom?" Rachel's voice was sharp, annoyed. "Jesus, are you okay?" Helen nodded. "Just tired." "Well, you scared the crap out of the kids," Rachel snapped. "You can't just collapse like that, you know. It's not fair to them." Not fair to them. The next morning, Helen sat in a sterile clinic, her hands clenched in her lap as the doctor used words like invasive and aggressive and advanced. Cancer. The kind that doesn't ask for permission. The kind that doesn't care how many years you've spent cleaning up after everyone else. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just nodded. The only thing she asked was, "How long do I have if I do nothing?" The doctor hesitated. "Months, maybe." And when she told Rachel, her daughter barely looked up from her laptop. "Well, we'll figure something out," Rachel had said. Helen laughed. She couldn't help it. It sounded like something a character would say in a sitcom, right before the laugh track kicks in. But this wasn't a sitcom. This was her life. 3 days later, a nurse arrived at the guest house where Helen lived behind Rachel's pristine modern home in the Pacific Northwest. Her name was Jenna Blake. She had short chestnut hair, warm brown eyes, and a calm presence that made even the air feel quieter. She didn't come with fanfare. She didn't offer empty cheer. She simply stepped inside, smiled, and asked where the tea mugs were. Something in Helen shifted. Jenna didn't treat her like a patient, or an obligation, or a ghost. She noticed things. The way Helen winced when standing, how she held a hand to her temple when the world spun. She started bringing homemade soup in thermoses, folding blankets just so. One afternoon, she refilled the bird feeder without being asked. "I figured the view might cheer you up," Jenna said. No one had thought about Helen's view in years. Rachel didn't ask about the cancer. She didn't offer to drive her mother to treatment. Instead, she said, "I assume you've hired someone? I don't have the bandwidth right now." And Helen did. She paid Jenna herself, quietly, without fuss, without expectation. But that decision, a single private act of self-care, would change everything. Because as Jenna settled into the rhythm of Helen's days, Rachel began to shift. Her visits became more frequent, but not warmer. She asked questions, too many questions. How many hours does she work? Is she using your car? Do the kids like her? And then came the worst one. Do you really need her here every day? Helen wanted to scream. Yes, she wanted to say, "I need her in the same way I used to need you." But instead she said, "She's the only one who treats me like I matter." That was the beginning of the end. Or maybe the beginning of something new. Jenna saw the decline before Helen did. The tiredness that clung to her bones, the skin thinning like paper, the hunger that never came. But she never made Helen feel small. She wrapped dignity into every gesture, every cup of tea, every gentle reminder to rest. One evening, as they sat side by side on the porch, Helen whispered, "You know, I used to think love was something you had to earn." Jenna didn't speak. She waited. "I don't think that anymore," Helen added. "You taught me that." And the next morning, Helen called her lawyer. Mr. Whitaker hadn't heard from her in 20 years. He sounded surprised, but kind. They met that Friday in his office downtown. Helen was thinner now. Her hands shook. But her voice, it was steady. "I want to revise my will," she said. She didn't do it out of spite. Not to punish Rachel, but to finally tell the truth of her life in the only way that mattered, by choosing who would carry her legacy. Not the daughter who kept score, but the woman who kept showing up. Have you ever mistaken obligation for love? What would it take for you to finally choose yourself? When Rachel finds out what Helen has done, the past won't just resurface, it will detonate. Continue reading to see the moment everything breaks. The envelope arrived on a Thursday morning, folded neatly, with no return address. Just Helen's name, written in sharp, efficient handwriting she recognized instantly. Rachel's. It had been nearly 2 weeks since their last encounter, the one where Helen had told her daughter, for the first time in her life, that love wasn't about being owed, it was about being present. Rachel had stormed out, silent as a slammed door, and hadn't returned. Helen assumed that was the end. A quiet, bitter end. But now, this. She sat in the kitchen with a mug of peppermint tea cooling beside her, staring at the envelope like it might detonate in her hands. Jenna noticed, of course. She always did. "Want me to open it?" she asked gently, drying her hands on a dish towel. "No," Helen said, "but I will." She slid a knife beneath the flap and unfolded the note. It wasn't long. Rachel never used more words than necessary, especially when she wanted to wound. This time was no different. "You've made your choice. So have I. Don't expect to see the kids for a while. They're confused, and I need to protect them. From this situation. From you." Helen read the words twice, then set the letter down with a stillness that frightened her. "She's using them," she whispered. "She's punishing me through them." Jenna didn't speak. She simply sat beside her, their elbows touching, letting the silence throb between them like a bruise. That night, Helen didn't sleep. The house was too quiet without the sound of her grandchildren racing through the yard, too empty without their laughter, their sticky fingers, their endless questions. She had once been the anchor in their lives. Now she was a ghost in her own story. And yet, wasn't this what she'd chosen? To draw a boundary, to stop begging for scraps of affection. So why did it feel like losing a limb? The following week blurred. Hospital visits, fatigue that dragged like chains behind her legs, food that tasted like cardboard. But Jenna was there through it all. She adjusted the oxygen machine without needing to be asked. She brought records from the library, knowing Helen missed the sound of old music. She even rearranged the photos on the shelf, so the ones of Helen smiling with the kids faced her chair. And then came the day Jenna found Helen sitting alone in the garden, the envelope still in her lap. "I can't fight her," Helen said. "Not like this, not with lawyers and letters and silence." "You're not fighting her," Jenna said softly. "You're fighting for yourself." Helen shook her head. "She's turning them against me. The kids, my own flesh and blood." "They love you," Jenna said. "They're just young and scared, and listening to the loudest voice in the room." Helen let the envelope fall into the grass. "Then maybe I should be louder." She called her lawyer the next day. "I want it all documented," she said. "Every visit, every threat, every refusal to communicate. Not because I want to sue her, but because I want the truth written somewhere. I want someone to know what really happened here." Mr. Whitaker agreed. He was calm as always, but Helen could sense his hesitation. "You're sure?" he asked. "This will escalate things." "It already has," she said. The next blow came 3 days later. A formal notice that Rachel had filed a petition questioning Helen's mental capacity when she signed the will. It was a low move, and an expected one, but it hit like a betrayal all the same. "She's calling me incompetent," Helen said that night, staring out the window as the sun dipped below the trees. "She's trying to erase me while I'm still breathing." Jenna sat beside her, silent. "I thought I was doing the right thing," Helen added. "Choosing peace, choosing truth, but now it's just chaos." Jenna turned to her, her voice firmer than usual. "Sometimes the right thing doesn't look peaceful at first. Sometimes it looks like hell." Helen laughed, but it caught in her throat. "She said I was being manipulated," she whispered. "By you." Jenna didn't flinch. "I know." "I'm sorry," Helen said, her voice cracking. "You didn't ask for any of this." "No," Jenna replied, reaching for her hand, "but I'm not walking away." The next morning, Helen woke to find Jenna outside, scrubbing the front porch in silence. Her movements were sharp, angry, like she needed the soap to erase the rumors seeping into their world. Whispers from neighbors, suspicious glances at the clinic, the pitying tone of the pharmacist when she asked about Helen's medication. "I didn't come here for money," Jenna said when Helen joined her. "I didn't even want to stay this long, but I care. And now I'm being painted as a thief." "You're not," Helen said. "I know," Jenna said, "but I'm tired of defending something I didn't do." That evening, Helen wrote a letter, not to Rachel, not to her grandchildren, to herself. She wrote about the quiet erasures of motherhood, about being praised for selflessness till it became expected, then resented. She wrote about love that turns into debt, about choosing yourself after a lifetime of being chosen last. And then she tucked the letter into her Bible, the one her mother had given her decades ago, and went to bed. The next day, Rachel came back, not with the kids, not with an apology, with a lawyer. She entered the guest house uninvited, her heels clicking across the floor like gunshots. "I want to talk," she said. Helen sat at the kitchen table, too tired to stand. Rachel's lawyer, young, polished, unnervingly cheerful, stood just behind her. "We'd like to discuss the will." "There's nothing to discuss," Helen said quietly. "I disagree," Rachel said. "You've made choices that are concerning, and I need to protect my family's interests." "I am your family," Helen said. Rachel didn't blink, then act like it. For a moment, everything went still. Then Helen stood slowly, her hands trembling not from weakness, but from restraint. "I've acted like family my entire life," she said. "Even when you didn't, even when you used me. But this isn't love, Rachel. This is ownership." Rachel's mouth opened, then closed. The lawyer cleared his throat. "Perhaps we should reconvene when emotions are—" "No," Helen interrupted. "There's nothing left to say." Rachel stared at her, her face pale. "You'll regret this." Helen smiled, a slow, tired smile. "Maybe, but I'll finally regret something I chose." And with that, Rachel turned and walked out, her lawyer trailing behind her like a shadow. Helen sank into her chair, her heart pounding, her vision swimming. Jenna appeared a moment later. "Was that—" "Yes," Helen said, "and it's done." They sat in silence for a while, the air between them heavy. Then Jenna said softly, "Do you think she'll come back?" Helen didn't answer right away. "I think she already left a long time ago." "What would you do if protecting your peace meant losing the people you once lived for?" "Rachel may be gone, but the storm she started is far from over. Stay with us, because what happens next will change everything." Helen's body was fading, but her mind had never felt more awake. Each morning came with less strength than the one before. Her hands weaker, her breath shorter, her vision dimmer, but her thoughts were sharper, clearer, as though her soul had chosen this time, these final weeks, to fully arrive. The house was quiet now. Rachel hadn't returned since the confrontation. Her lawyer had withdrawn the petition without explanation, and Helen suspected someone, perhaps the grandchildren, perhaps even Mr. Whitaker, had finally told Rachel what pride wouldn't let her see, that the battle was already lost. Not because Helen had won, but because she'd stopped playing. Jenna remained, quiet, steady, present. Her kindness never wavered, but something in her had grown heavier since the lawyer's visit, like she'd absorbed the last of Helen's pain and carried it silently in her own spine. One afternoon, as golden light filtered through the curtains and the sound of distant lawnmowers hummed like a lullaby, Jenna sat at the foot of Helen's bed. "Do you want me to call them?" she asked. "The kids?" Helen hesitated, then shook her head. "If they come, it should be because they want to, not because someone told them to." Jenna nodded, understanding more than Helen had to say. "But maybe," Helen added softly, "leave the gate unlocked, just in case." That evening, Helen sat by the window wrapped in her favorite knit blanket, the one with the faded blue stitching from a trip to Vermont decades ago. Outside, the trees swayed in the wind like they were saying goodbye without saying the words. "I used to think dying meant disappearing," she said aloud, not sure if Jenna was still in the room. "But I don't feel like I'm fading. I feel like I'm finally coming into view." Jenna turned from the stove, where she was heating up soup. "You are." Helen smiled, the kind that reached her eyes. That night, something unexpected happened. A knock on the door. It was soft, hesitant, not the sharp, entitled rhythm of Rachel's past intrusions. Helen looked at Jenna. Jenna went to the door. It was Rachel. She stood there holding a paper bag and a bouquet of tulips, yellow, Helen's favorite. Her eyes were red, her face bare of makeup, and her hands shook slightly. "Is she awake?" she asked, almost in a whisper. Jenna nodded, then stepped aside. Rachel entered like someone stepping into sacred ground, slowly, gently, without defense. Helen didn't speak. She waited. Rachel sat across from her, placing the tulips on the side table. The paper bag she held out without a word. Helen took it. Inside was a photo album, handmade, bound in soft leather. She opened it. There were pictures she hadn't seen in years. Rachel as a child, her late husband, the beach trips, the birthday parties, the days when everything felt simpler, even if it wasn't. But more than that, there were letters, typed, folded, from Rachel. "I started writing them after Dad died," she said. "But I never gave them to you. I blamed you for leaving him, for breaking the family. But I was too young to see the cracks, too proud to ask the right questions." Helen turned a page. Another letter. Another paragraph of anger slowly turning into reflection. "I hated you for needing space," Rachel continued, "because it meant I had to grow up, and I didn't want to." Helen closed the book gently, her hands trembling now for a different reason. "I don't expect forgiveness," Rachel said, "but I wanted to leave something behind in case I was too late." Helen looked at her daughter for a long time. Then she reached for her hand. "You were never too late," she whispered. They stayed like that, hand in hand, until the sky outside faded to soft indigo. Rachel helped Jenna clean up that night. She didn't try to dominate the kitchen. She didn't ask where anything was. She just observed, followed, shared. The next morning, Helen asked Jenna to take a photo of the three of them. Jenna on one side, Rachel on the other. The grandchildren weren't there. Helen didn't ask why. She didn't need to. That photo stayed on the nightstand. It was the last one she ever took. Helen passed away 3 days later, peacefully, in her sleep. With her hand resting on the letter she had written to herself, the one she never showed anyone, the one Jenna found later, folded beside the Bible. Jenna sat alone in the room for a long time. Then she wept, not for the loss, but for the privilege. Rachel came that afternoon. She didn't cry when she saw her mother. She knelt beside her, touched her fingers gently, and whispered something only Helen would understand. Then she turned to Jenna. "I'll take care of the funeral," she said, "but I want you there. You belong." Jenna nodded. The funeral was small, beautiful. The grandchildren came, quiet and unsure at first, but eventually leaning into the stories people told. Neighbors, nurses, a few of Helen's old friends who still remembered the woman she used to be before she was folded into motherhood and illness. Mr. Whitaker read the will. There were no surprises. The grandchildren received what Helen had promised: trusts, letters, guidance. Rachel received nothing material, but she received something else, a box of those unsent letters. Her own words returned to her, a mirror of her growth. Jenna received the house, the garden, the old teacups, and the music collection. Rachel didn't contest it. She stayed after the reading, walking through the garden alone. Jenna watched her from the porch. "Do you hate me?" Rachel asked, not turning around. "No," Jenna said. Rachel exhaled. I would have. I know, Jenna replied. They stood in silence for a long time. Then Rachel said, She saw you in ways I didn't. She loved you, Jenna said, in ways you'll feel for years. Rachel nodded. A tear slipped down, but she didn't wipe it away. Later that week, Jenna sat on the porch Helen had loved so much. The air smelled like lilac and cinnamon. Spring was arriving. The wind rustled the trees, and somewhere in the branches, a bird began to sing. Jenna closed her eyes and listened. In the stillness, she could almost hear Helen's voice. You are not invisible. You are not too late. You were always enough. What part of Helen's journey resonated most deeply with you? Comment 100 if this story touched your heart. Tell us where you're watching from. We'd love to know. And if this story meant something to you, share it with someone you care about. Thank you for watching Life Stories.